shall, from time to time, give the Congress information of the State of the Union. And that is what President Trump just did. So, what did people think about his speech? We're going to find out from our guests tonight. Before we get to them, we're going to go to DC and talk with Jesse Ramos, who is Americans for Prosperity Montana State Director and was wandering around DC talking to members of Congress earlier today. Jesse, welcome.
Hey, emphasis on wandering around. I don't know how anybody finds anything in this town. It's so easy to get lost, especially in the capital.
I didn't mean to make it seem like you're in Lord of the Rings, just kind of wandering around looking.
I'm looking for somewhere to go, like Mordor or whatever. Mordor, sorry.
Well, you are in the nation's capital, otherwise known as the swamp. Some people would call it Mordor. So anyway, though, I'm sure you talked to plenty of good people, and I am curious, like you talked to them before the State of the Union. What were some of the folks you talked to? Well, first of all, who were they? And secondly, what was on their mind and what did they anticipate?
Yeah, so myself and my co-host Aaron Flint, we went there. We were on Media Row in the House Cannon building. So we talked to probably 15 different members of Congress, folks from all over the United States representing us, representing a whole variety of constituencies from urban areas to agricultural areas to timber areas to industrial areas, really looking all over the place. And all their constituents have different needs. And so we talked to, for instance, Congressman Troy Downing from Montana. We spoke to Chairman Jim Jordan out of Ohio. We spoke to even Nick Shirley, who uncovered the Minnesota fraud recently. And really, the message was the same, that the president needed to obviously take a major victory lap for the huge wins that have been delivered under this Congress and under his presidency. But also, all the members did say that he needed to talk about what is going to happen next and that there's still work to do. They really wanted him to emphasize that under this administration, under this Congress, they were still going to deliver wins for the American people, and they still had work to do to make their lives better, to make their lives more affordable.
So did anything that any member in particular say stand out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a lot, came up about affordable housing and just affordability in general. We
Yeah.
talked about just the dire need for lower energy prices. Energy security was a big deal. Talked to a lot of folks in the western states. Spoke to obviously folks in Montana, in Idaho, in Wyoming, in North Dakota, in Colorado. Spoke a lot about energy security and also needing to unleash abundance. That was a really big message, that we have millions of acres of forest land that burns up and goes up in smoke every single year. When that timber could be used to build homes, to make homes cheaper, it could be used to provide the American dream for millions of Americans like it used to. There's copper, there's silver, there's gold buried under mountains that could be used to again build the American dreams for workers, to make us much more competitive in the world stage instead of outsourcing those jobs over to China, Russia, and India. We should be doing it here. Nobody does it better. Nobody does it cheaper. Nobody does it safer than right here in America. And we need to unleash American energy abundance, and we need to increase affordability for folks in this country.
Mm-hmm. Did you have the sense in talking to the members of Congress that was there a sense of optimism? Was there obviously you said that there's anticipation about talking about what's coming next? How would you characterize their mood?
Yeah, that's a great question. They were incredibly optimistic. Again, I think, they had a little bit of pride for the great work they did, as they should. They talked about the incredibly narrow margin that they've had to work with, and really the incredible wins that they have had. I know that they talked about the fact that ultimately there hasn't been a ton of bills in terms of numbers, but what those bills have done and what those bills have had in them are truly transformational. They talked about the working families tax cuts, aka the One Big Beautiful Bill, being the most transformational piece of legislation folks had seen in a decade. But even still, they did not want to rest on their laurels. They knew that there was still work that had to get done. They knew that people are still struggling. They're still suffering. They're still having a hard time buying a home, putting food on the table, and that the potential is there, that we have it right here in America, but all we need is the government to get out of the way. And that's really what the Republicans in Congress are trying to do, is just take the government out of people's pockets, take the government out of the regulatory environment to the extent that it's choking down jobs, and really, again, balance environmentalism and environmental protection with the need to unleash American energy abundance. And really, they talked about how there's no better way to be a steward of the environment than responsibly manage it.
Yeah, and I know you talked to a lot of members, especially from Western states. I mean, you, of course, being from Montana, a number of the people that you listed, from Western states, and those are issues that certainly ring true throughout the country, but especially with Western states. And that push for realizing all of our energy potential. I mean, the abundance that we have in all the rich natural resources, and whether it's permitting reform or regulatory reform to unleash what America has in its ground is a big priority. I'm glad to see the Trump administration's been stepping up there and doing it, and that the president mentioned it. So we look forward to seeing what they're going to do there. So, any other impressions being on Capitol Hill on such a fun day? I've been on Capitol Hill for State of the Union Day before, and there's a lot of excitement and anticipation.
Well, it's kind of like a political nerd's version of the Super Bowl. So for me, it was fantastic. I'd rather be there than at the Super Bowl. There was probably 24 media outlets and probably well over 50 members of Congress, all folks that, again, have been elected by people from all kinds of different constituencies, from like very rural farmland to very urban Texas to coastal areas to Midwest areas. So it was just really unbelievable to talk to all the folks that actually are in charge of making the laws in this country. And it was really encouraging to see them take it so seriously. And again, celebrate the wins, but not get arrogant, not get complacent, and still recognize that people are hurting and that people still need to have them continue to work hard and push through. And there's a little, I guess the one thing I would say is that there is a little nervousness about the upcoming midterms, but that's why, again, they have to be able to show folks, and they've talked about this openly, that they are the party that's going to make a difference for the average American. They're the people who are going to fight for the working American. They're the folks that are going to actually do what they say, get government out of the way, and reignite the American dream.
Cool. Well, Jesse, I really appreciate you making some time to join us. I'm glad that you're out there in DC, kind of the man on the scene. And I'll let you. We're going to be pushing 11:30 here DC time soon, so I imagine that you gotta get yourself to bed at some point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Our man from Montana, hanging out in DC. Well, folks, I wanted to kind of share some of my thoughts. Watch the whole State of the Union. President Trump didn't disappoint, going 2 hours as he usually does, but he hit a lot of the themes that I know Americans Prosperity talks about, not all, but a lot, and especially about, some of the affordability issues when we're talking about gas prices, being in the low twos. Talked about how in Iowa, it was $1.85, which I'm pretty crazy. Mortgage rates being down and oil production being up. I mean, there's a lot, and 70,000 new construction jobs. Those are all things that I think we want to highlight, and as the national conversation goes forward, because what we saw in the last administration was a lack of affordability. Interest rates were up, inflation was sky high, record levels, which the president made light of in his speech today. So I think AFP is going to be talking about affordability, and that you'll see that in the coming weeks. But it's such an important issue. But if people don't feel it, you can tell people all they want, but people need to feel it. Now, hopefully, we all do start to feel it, because some of these underlying things are really good. But hopefully that we feel like prices are coming down and everyone can afford more. But I think that there's a lot of good stories to tell. I love, just personally, some of the pageantry. I mean, having the U.S. men's Olympic hockey team was pretty amazing. All of them there, and I think the whole chamber was pretty excited about that. But then some of the veterans, 2 Medal of Honor awardees, just the various stories from the people, the veterans who are there, and the folks whose personal ties. I mean, President Trump's always been a showman for his entire career, and he doesn't disappoint in this case, on one of the biggest stages. So I thought those are really even unifying at times. Clearly, the chamber is very divided and really divided at times, but there are a few moments that were really uniting, and I really appreciated that. So, all right. Well, hey, we're going to bop out to the great state of South Dakota to get some reaction from our South Dakota State Director, Jennifer Beving. South Dakota is also not only South Dakota a great state, but also an interesting place, the home home state of the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, and so we wanted to kind of talk to Jennifer and get the reaction. She watched it tonight with some legislators there in Pierre. So let's have Jennifer join us.
Hey, thanks, David. Yeah, we had a long day here in Pierre. We're in our legislative session and we went a little late. But yeah, I watched it with a lot of legislators and upcoming candidates from a kind of a secret underground bunker here in Pierre. So that was great. I think the biggest sort of takeaway, like you said, was the hockey team coming in and just sort of the American spirit and being proud to be an American. I think that got a lot of cheers from the crowd that I was with. And then I think also just focusing, being from the Mount Rushmore state, the America's 250th anniversary birthday was just the pride in that and kind of pushing forward on that. We are really looking forward to celebrating that this summer at Mount Rushmore. So that was some of our big takeaways. And then, like you had mentioned before, one of the Medal of Honor winners I was actually with in our kind of little group that we were with. There were several people. I think it was Royce Williams. He is from South Dakota originally.
Oh,
And so I was talking to a couple of people who had worked really hard with some of our South Dakota federal delegation to get him that Medal of Honor. And so his service in the Korean War was sort of a top secret enterprise that they were doing that was not unclassified for almost 75 years. So he was 100 years old. They just found out on Thursday that this was all happening and got him flown out there. So I got some of the inside scoop on that. So that was really fun.
oh, that's fabulous. I mean, when you see guys who are 100 years old who served this nation heroically, that's just wonderful to see them appreciated. But then throw in the Congressional Medal of Honor, and that is so special. How cool! I'm glad that you got those tidbits. That's wonderful. It's amazing how fast some of that stuff comes together in last minute.
Yeah, they had worked really hard on it and they said they didn't know until Thursday that this was happening. So they had to get him on a plane from he doesn't live in South Dakota anymore, but he was from South Dakota. And so they had to get him on a plane. And I think the 3-minute standing ovation that he got, and it got an ovation just where we were at watching that. And so that just kind of reigniting, like Jesse said, the American dream and kind of the pride in America was, I think, our biggest takeaway. And then also, I think the big takeaway was the affordability. That really resonated with South Dakotans here.
Mhm.
Out here, housing affordability, energy prices are always a big deal to us. So that was kind of the main topic of conversation that I heard.
Sure. Um, one of the things that I think was kind of striking, like I mentioned just earlier, the unifying moments of the Medal of Honor winners, the heroes, the heart, pulling your heartstrings stories often were unifying, but there was plenty of division obvious in the chamber. And you're with a bunch of legislators who are not unfamiliar with division at times, kind of part of the political process in some ways. I was with a group here in Illinois, or outside of Chicago where I am, and it was a pretty partisan group, pretty hardcore. It was kind of a pro-Trump, pro-Republican crowd, so it takes on a bit of like a sporting event feel. But any read on kind of that dynamic from was watching it with a group of legislators and politicos?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it was unifying around, especially in South Dakota. I think we are, having the hockey game. We're sort of close to Canada, so that was really fun. And so, everyone was unified around the American spirit and being proud to be from the United States. And so that was really fun because we did have kind of a diverse group there tonight, people from many political spectrums. And so that was really fun just to kind of see. And it was a great atmosphere. It was a good mood. People were hopeful. I think, even though I know it's tough in DC to get some of these things passed, they were hopeful with kind of the attitude and the spirit that the president was putting forth and pushing forward on some of these really important issues. And I think just sort of the robustness of just pushing forward on the American dream and things that solve problems for people here in South Dakota. We're kind of remote from there, but hitting on the affordability on energy prices, things like that was really kind of top of mind for people out here because we we run on thin margins out here in South Dakota, and so that was I think housing and jobs are a big topic here. So
Yeah.
that was fun to see sort of unify for the whole group.
Well, it's also very interesting because South Dakota is home to the leader of the Senate, Senate President or Senate Majority Leader John Thune. And I'm sure everybody in that room knows John Thune because I've been to South Dakota and everybody knows John Thune because it's a small place and he's been around a while and he's very recognizable. So I imagine there's a sense of pride a little bit. I saw President Trump kind of gave him a shout out, not by name but by stature, at one point in the speech. So any interesting tidbits from that being Senator Thune's hometown?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably some that I can't like talk about here, but like it's a small state. So we've all met uh John Thune, and we, all the leaders from South Dakota, they're here a lot. And so that's the great thing about South Dakota is, if we want to talk to them, we can get a conversation with them. They're out here in the state doing a lot of things here. So it's pretty fun to be able to see them regularly and have, be able to have those conversations and that sort of direct connection to DC and the work that they're doing there. And so a lot of people there had worked on campaigns for a lot of people who are out in DC. And so it was fun to get the inside kind of info on, how hard it is to get to those positions and how hard it is to kind of get some of those votes through. So it was a good time. Everyone was in good spirits here, and, just looking forward to what we can get past in the next, few months here to kind of push forward on some of the goals that President Trump outlined.
Yeah. Well, hey, one final thing. I mean, the president talked about regulatory reform and what his administration has done, which has been a lot of great work that they've done, often under the radar, that's going to help this economy forward. You guys have some pretty important regulatory reform priorities in South Dakota that are coming down to the wire. Any updates on that in the state?
Yeah, we had a crazy day today in the Senate. We had our regulatory reform bill, known as the Reins bill, sort of federally, made it through the Senate today with no opposition. So I thought that was a great
Great.
sign for what South Dakota is pushing for. We talked to a lot of the senators and no one really had any issues with that. And so I think that's such a great signal to what South Dakota is trying to do to keep regulations down for, so it doesn't cost the South Dakotan people a lot
Yeah.
to do business here, and we can keep inviting businesses in and kind of keep our state moving in the right direction. So it was a good day. There was some drama in the Senate today in South Dakota. It went long, but it's just so fun to be there and, be there in person and see how this plays out, especially with our legislature, who is all volunteers, just putting their time in to get these things done. So it was great.
Well, good. Now, South Dakota is a great place to do business. It's a lot of low regulatory state, but it can always be better. We're always trying to keep it on the cutting edge to be in a great state for investment and do business and to raise a family. So I appreciate your hard work there. And I appreciate you joining us late tonight. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah. I had to get out of the secret basement we were in watching this party and find a space, but it was a great night. So thanks for having me on, David.
Awesome. Anytime. Loved it. Thanks. Hey, we're going to shoot up to the north, the far northwest now, up to the great state of Alaska for our state director, AFP State Director Brett Huber, to get his reaction from Alaska. Always a unique reaction, and I know he was watching it with a bunch of fellow Alaskans. And Brett, thanks for joining us and giving your impression of the President's State of the Union address.
David, it's always a pleasure, and it was a great night tonight. We joined some of our friends at the Republican Party for a watch, and probably had 50 or 60 people in the room. Everybody was very intent. They were very pleased, and it seemed like the best reactions here were when they talked about things that matter to Americans at the dinner table, when they talked about the things that were going to impact individuals' lives, when they talked about the things that really, like our organization, works towards freedom and towards opportunity. That's what got this group fired up. And then, of course, we've got the highest per capita percentage of veterans any place in the nation. So any of those pieces that touched our armed services are always important to Alaskans. It was great. You saw in this room kind of a little bit of a new pride. I think it was a good suggestion, a good shot. They liked the contrast here, but they also liked it when everybody got together and they felt that unity. So Even from a bunch of people that are on one side or the other, right? They still appreciate that unity too, and it really was about the things that impact them at home.
So, resource development, energy is a huge issue for Alaska, obviously, as much so as any state in the nation. So any reaction to what the president had to say when it came to energy production?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the first time in decades, David, and certainly such a contrast from the last administration. We're not complaining about federal overreach. We finally have partners in Washington that see the value of what Alaska can provide, both as a resource state, as a geopolitical state, as a transportation state. It's the first time Alaskans feel like we've got a congressional delegation and a president that's working for them. So resource is prosperity in Alaska. I know that you've heard me say that before. So every time we talk about that, we're a big state, but we don't have a ton of people, right? We're 700,000 people. If we lose a project, a major resource development project, that's a huge blow to the state. We're not a state that has 50 things going on. We're a state that has big things going on, but each big thing is very important to Alaskans, to the energy security of the nation, and to just providing jobs and opportunity right here in the state of the North.
So I know you were with a right of center group there. What was people's favorite parts? And were there any parts where people were uncomfortable?
That's a great question. I think I was watching the room, right? And as he started, everybody was paying very close attention, but there wasn't a lot of energy. There was a little bit of a buildup. You could tell people were kind of waiting. And then when he turned into his rally president voice and brought out the hockey team, it brought the room down, of course. I mean, how can you look at the examples of fine Americans that we saw tonight and not feel connected to the country we live in and the things that really matter? So the reaction didn't surprise me. I think this room really appreciated the contrast on some of those issues. What I heard from them is that's a president that looks like he has command of the podium. He's been there before. He wants to lead. But again, when they all came together on issues that united everybody on the floor and when you just couldn't help but feel that patriotism, this room all liked that too. So it's not just about sides. I think there's a general difference of if government's the answer or people are the answer. That's what I heard in this room. And every time he leaned towards what matters to people and people being the answer instead of government, this room liked it a lot.
Cool. Well, hey, I know it's earlier in Alaska than it was for DC, where Jesse was, but I know you got stuff to go do, and I really appreciate you spending time there with a lot of the folks from our team and other people from across Alaska, and then reporting back, giving us a feel for what's going on all across the country. So, Brett, I really appreciate you joining us.
We always love to highlight our state. Thanks for the time, David. Keep up the great work. I sure appreciate you sharing the message across the nation for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun times. Well, hey, it was fun being here late night. We don't always get to do this. Thanks folks for spending time with us tonight. You heard our thoughts. So what are yours? What did you think about the president's speech? As we sign off, always remember that liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom.